This is Stormworks, and this is the Orca. The Orca is a multiplayer deep dive submarine. You can pilot it on your own if you just want to play around with a large vehicle, but it is intended for cruise. Let's go ahead and see what makes it special. We're going to bring our speed up to maybe 15%, start the engines, and let's see what's going on. I did say 15%, right? Aren't we kind of hauling butt for 15%? Yeah, and don't those don't sound like the sort of engines you'd normally get in a submarine. Well, it turns out there's an exploit in this version of the game, and you can use jet engines underwater. You could make this go as fast as you want using jet engines, but there's a limit to how far the light goes underwater and how fast a human can react. So I've gone ahead and capped it at 50 kilometers an hour, which is still a little too fast. But that makes it at least vaguely controllable, and you can always cut the thrust down to something more reasonable. If you want to try and pilot it underwater at this kind of speed, here's a couple of tips. That blue light you see blinking on and off, blue means we're sinking, no light means we're rising. If we turn on the rest of the lights, this is going to be our main way to tell how far above the ground we are. When they're vertical, you're far from the ground. When they're horizontal, you're at the ground. So you basically want to use those to help keep you, how far are you above the ground? Well, take a look at your lights and find out. But you're going to want to be careful. There's a razor edge between being able to see the ground and crashing into a random rock outcropping. So, taking this at full speed is quite a risk, and this is not my first take. What we're going to want to do is try to bring this down for some nice deep sea diving. But you know what? This area is a little bit too deep. So we're going to try and turn around and get to an area where we're not past the 250 meter dive limit, because the dive limit is something I can't change with a submarine. My next submarine is going to have some kind of exploration vehicle on it for diving deeper than 250. But for now, I think we're just going to try and find a spot that's not quite so deep, just so that I can get outside the ship, you know? By the way, you may have noticed that there is a water glitch in this version of the game. Right now it is applying water physics to me, and the only reason I am still alive is because I am seated. If you are moving fast in an underwater vehicle in this version of the game, you will probably die. So just keep that in mind and be careful. So stay seated while the vehicle is in motion. Anyhow, let's park here. I think we're still below the dive limit, but it's not by much. Yeah, so we'll be able to get out and just move up a little bit. That sound is our nose keepers. So if we take a look, these little engines here, these help us get off the ground when we want to get back to the surface, and they also help keep our nose down if for some reason we are light in front, which we are light in front right now because we have one mostly empty fuel tank up front, which we'll get to later. Let's take a tour. This is obviously the piloting booth. This is a very, very Spartan booth because if you're distracted by trying to look at things, then you will die. This can be piloted in first-person mode, but you won't be able to see the ground, because if you're this close to the ground, you're dead. So you will have to pilot by instruments, and that is a hair-raising, let me just tell you. Back here, we've got a bathroom, shower, deep dive chamber, and another identical deep dive chamber on the other side. We'll talk about those later. Here's our ballast control system. We'll go ahead and just turn that off since we're currently full of ballast. Captain's quarters, medical room, which we could really use because we got pretty screwed up in that last take. And then random bunks. Back here we've got our engine room, and you can see the engine quote-unquote trick, which is that you just put engines in and it works. You can also see our fuel tanks. Now these tanks are, this tank up here is mostly empty, and that means that it's light. It's mostly full of air. Now you can make this so that it refills with water, because what happens is when you use the tank up, it automatically refills with water, and that'll keep the ship balanced. But we're currently at a bad point where we've used up most of the tank, but there's still some fuel in there, so we're a little bit light in the nose. It's not going to cause us any troubles, but it's worth noting. Back here we've got the winch control system, and we've got a ladder that leads up to the top dock. There's nothing docked up there, so I don't feel like opening it, because we would die. There's also a second deck with a nice little viewing chamber. A battery room. I'm going to think about putting something in here, but I can't think of what I would. And then here is our emergency room, where we can tell it to charge the batteries if we're running low, which should never happen, and use emergency power if we do something horrible and end up ripping out our jet engines somehow, which is surprisingly possible when you're going 50 kilometers an hour. This is our main entry hatch, which we're not going to open up, and it stays locked until you manually unlock it, just in case you have the overwhelming urge to accidentally click buttons while you're running around. Let's go for a dive. Both deep dive rooms are identical, and the way they work is that there is a chamber inside the ship that stores water, and it can store more water than can fit in this room. So what happens is, if that has water in it, you pump that water into this room, you open the door, no water gets in because it's already full of water, and it works fine. So let's go ahead and take on some suits. There's no water in that room right now, so we're just going to let this room fill up. Now, you can see that this is a ship, and we can't go down and look at the underside, but we can look at some of the details, like there's a docking port, and we've got some engines in the back there. And I think I better get back inside before anything horrible happens to me here and I die. That would be a real shame. Let's go ahead and close this room. So now you can see that this room is completely flooded, but if we hit empty, it empties out this room and puts it into the deep ballast room. See? Now, if we ever wanted to go diving again in the depths, we would hit flood, and it would pump in the opposite direction, and by doing this, we can keep from having any extra water enter the ship, and that's really critical when you're down this deep. Now, you might be wondering, well, what about these things? You haven't shown me what those are yet. Well, those are our escape rooms, which we'll use, but I want to actually cause us to have some damage before we do. So let's go ahead and take some damage here. And to do that, we're just going to go ahead and hit forward. There we are. We have now taken some damage. Ooh, we took a lot of damage. Oh, okay, that was just a water glitch. So we took some damage. Not as much as I might have thought. We damaged a couple of elements, but this might... I think I can actually still pilot this fine. I don't think there's... Yeah, nothing critical is damaged. The only thing that really got hurt were... we've screwed up our altimeter, or rather our distance meter on the bottom there. So we can't tell how far above the ground we are. But if we were just trying to get back to the surface, we could get back to the surface with no issues. Let's go ahead and try it for a little bit more damage than that. We can really get screwed up. There's no reason to wuss out. Yeah, there we are. Let's go ahead and do that some more. Take some real damage. Crash, crunch, crash, crunch. All right, so now we've taken some damage. Let's go explore and see exactly how much damage we seem to have taken. We actually seem to be pretty intact. Oh. There's some flooding in the front tank. That's fine. You know what? Despite having taken all that damage, we're not actually... we're not actually too badly off. We can go ahead and take more damage than this. We can't actually raise our nose anymore because our nose... there we are. Our nose elements took some damage and can't fire anymore. But I'm trying to get us to take some real damage, and it's not as easy as you might think. Okay, so now we've taken some damage to an electrical component. You can see that we're flooding through our main hatch, which is not something... Oh, I see what happened. We were just hit so hard that it couldn't hold up. We're still not actually damaged very much. These submarines are remarkably durable ships. Ah, it looks like we've finally taken out the main control system, though, because our engines won't shut off. Yeah. I've told our engines to shut off, but they're still firing. And we're, like, just nosing into this rock that's directly ahead of us. And we're doomed! Oh, no! We're especially doomed because we're past the 250 limit, I think. I'm not actually sure how far down we are. But it's time for us to leave. So we're just going to take a seat. And then we're going to close the hatch. And then we're going to launch. There we go. Come on, you can do it. If we get stuck, I'll be really disappointed. We're tipped, and this is not ideal for us. Just see if we can knock it out by running around a little bit. There we are. Whoa! Oh, we were only 50 meters down. And we survived. Whew! That was close. I mean, if I had to swim that 50 meters up using dive gear, I might have had no problem doing it. Anyway, we can now escape from this room. No, that's a launch. Let's go ahead and hatch there. And just leave through the hatch and get eaten by sharks. Woohoo! And that is the Orca. There are a lot of refinements I would like to make in the next version, like having a vehicle bay for exploring those deep areas. But I think this works great for your current needs when you're trying to explore those deep regions. So if you feel like this is the sort of thing that you might like, feel free to give it a shot, and see you around when I create the next submarine.